Hi, this is Patrick Daniel and Randy Canchi from Patrick Daniel Law here on the Legal Lens with our weekly interview and our weekly discussion on legal issues that are prevalent in the community. This week we have Mr. Frank Billingsley, local meteorologist, during our Pride Month, here to discuss a few of the issues that he's encountered in his journey to where he currently stands, including the authorship of a book relative to his travels and his experiences consistent with what we are celebrating as our Pride Month. Randy knows him in a personal capacity, and we really appreciate Frank coming on to discuss these issues with us. We want to take a moment out to remember George Floyd's plight. He's being buried here in Houston today. There's nothing we can say other than how horrific of an event this is and how unfortunate it is, but let it be a call to arms to all those out there to stop racial injustice and to stop the things that young black men and women everywhere have experienced over the course of time. We believe it's the time to take action to make change in the community as well as across the country and across the world. This is the sort of thing that let's hope that he sacrificed himself for the greater good of the many. Hopefully that's the only way that we can fortunately look back on this situation and understand that some good could come out of it, that he made a change for the rest of us. With all of that being said, Frank, thanks for being here. We appreciate it on a less somber note, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you. It's nice to see you guys. You look like you're hard at work. I look like I just had breakfast.
Yeah,
That's right.
we see you in a tie pretty much every night, Frank. So
I know. When I don't have to be in a tie, I'm usually not in one.
yeah.
Well, don't worry. The only thing you won't be getting asked today is to predict the weather over the course of the next few days. We're going to cut you some slack. We know that the hurricane season is upon us, and it's unpredictable to say the least. But Randy, I'll let you start off and discuss a few things. Frank, we just really appreciate you being here and taking time out of your day, particularly during the situation that we've encountered with COVID-19. So Randy, take it away.
Yeah, Frank, I know that we've known each other for years, and I know that you've been in Houston since '89.
Yep.
And it's interesting that we're celebrating Pride in this way, and we have sort of the aggregate of these issues, right? We're talking about Pride and this group that's been disparaged, really, this group that has suffered, people in the LGBTQ community, but also now we have this additional factor of people in the Black community that are suffering. Now that you have, you've been in Houston, I'm 40 years old. I know that you have a few more years on me. You've seen so much. Tell us what it's been like for you at your age to see. We're talking from Stonewall to in the 16 years I've been out, I've seen a huge change. So let's talk about the change that you've seen your whole lifetime, from Stonewall to the 80s to the 90s to now what's going on today. Tell the viewers kind of your experience.
Well, I do. I have 20 years on you. I'll be 60 years old in 2 weeks. How about that? So, I know, right? They're doctors for everything. And I came out in 1979, so I was 19 years old, and that was 10 years after Stonewall. Yeah. And I wasn't out to my family or to my friends, but I was 19. I could drive. I could find a place to go and socialize, and so I was certainly getting more and more friends. I had a boyfriend. So by 1979, I had pretty much determined probably at least where I was going to go in terms of being gay or staying in the closet. So I was coming out of the closet in 1979, but it was a good time to come out of the closet. Stonewall had happened. There had been revolutions for everything. The women's revolution, and gay lib is what they called it. And there was a sort of a welcoming time in the 70s, and especially the late 70s. I can remember we were about to get to 1980, and Time magazine had an article on all the hip things for the 80s, like what this decade's going to have. And one of them that was going to be really hip was gay waiters. Can you imagine? That was one of the hip things. But it kind of shows you that there was more and more acceptance. And then the AIDS pandemic came along, and that put a brake on everything, every stride that we had made in 12 years. I first heard about AIDS from Dan Rather in February of 1981. And I remember that broadcast like it was yesterday. That 7 men in New York and San Francisco had a mysterious illness and it killed them. And no one knew what it was. The only thing they had in common is that all 7 of them were gay. And everybody's like looking at each other thinking, oh my gosh, what is this? And then of course it was what it was for years. And without the support of really the government for a long time, and without the support of the straight community, everyone was afraid. It was a tough time through the 80s. And so it took 10 years more to kind of get back on the track of celebrating who we were and more people coming out of the closet. And I think what really changed things for us was people coming out. Because once you have a friend, you understand what being gay is about. Once you have a relative, a father, a son, an uncle, a brother, a sister, an aunt, a niece, once you have someone in your life that's your family and they're gay, not only do you understand it, but you take time to realize who this person is and what they're all about. And that's really what helped, I think, propel us into the 2000s and really make a difference and head us toward change in terms of legal marriage. So, and we, Kevin and I got married on 12/12/12, mainly because I can remember that date so well. But it was in July of 2011 that New York State passed gay marriage. They were one of 14 states. And so we thought, we don't know when Texas is going to come around to this. And who knew it would be so soon? But we were like, well, if we're going to get married, let's go to New York and do it. So we saved our money and we went to New York and we did it in December of 2012. And then of course the gates sort of opened up, and I think they continue to. I don't see a lot of discrimination. I'm sure there's marginalization, even to me, that I don't know about. I mean, certainly there are people who are like, oh yeah, that I'm cool with gays. I just, don't want to be around them. And there may be that, but I don't see a lot of blatant homophobia. And when it does occur, I think social media knocks it down pretty quickly these days. I don't know, you guys in the law business, I don't know, there's probably other issues that I'm not aware of, but my life it hasn't been simple, but I think ultimately you have to get comfortable with yourself. I think a lot of my problems in my earlier years in the 80s were probably brought on by my own mentality of my own self-loathing of well, here we are gay and we have AIDS and it's a terrible time for me and blah, 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 and just feeling sorry for myself. But a lot of times that's how we act. I mean, that's what happens to a lot of young people. When the highest suicide rate among teenagers is with gay teenagers. And that's, if there's any message I want, it's for people to know that it does get better. And we had that campaign for a while. It gets better. And there was an anti-bullying and an anti-suicide message, helping people to get through those tough times, and especially their teen years. And that'd be my message, is that it not only does get better, it gets richer. Life gets richer. And when you embrace who you are and you reach out in your own way to the world, let the world reach back to you, and learn how to filter out the negative and embrace the positive, it really does get better. And it becomes a life worth living. And you learn that making other people happy makes you happy. And giving back gives you satisfaction. And I think that comes with maturity and time. When we're really young, in our teen years and even our 20s, it's all about I want what I want when I want it. It's kind of all about me, and look at me, I'm here. And then you finally mature to a place where you say, you know what, life is good. And if I can be a part of the fabric, then I want to be. And you realize when looking back at your younger self, you wish you'd known that then. You wish you'd known that if you are the kind of person that can be counted on, the kind of person who is trustworthy and really wants to make a difference, then the good things in the world will gravitate toward you. You will give you'll give people a reason to want to be around you. Sure. So that's kind of where I've been over the last 40 years. It hadn't always been easy, but if you keep in mind that better things always do come along, and patience is a virtue, and sort of all those things that you hear about growing up, they really are true. And if you stick to a solid path, I've found I don't like change particularly. For me, I mean, I live in the house I'm in right now. I've been living in the same house for 25 years. I'm not somebody that wants to go jumping from place to place. And I drive cars until the wheels fall off and that sort of thing. So once I find a plan that works for me, I think I stick to it. After all, I've been doing weather since 1982. And there's no law degree in the closet, so I'm not going to switch.
Yeah. Frank, what you said, it's so resonant to me. I was born in 80, and when I was born, of course, the AIDS pandemic came out, and I'll never forget. And I think now at 40, right, I look back and you kind of become more of a history buff as you get older, right? And
Right.
you see about Studio 54, and the culture was very mixed. You got the gays and the straights, and that was sort of like everyone was together. Then all of a sudden now this thing comes up, and I think the gay community, we're talking to a good friend of mine last week who's a physician. All of a sudden it's sort of the leper community, right? So it's marginalized, it's pushed away, and it's like, oh, this is messy. We don't know what's going on with,
Right.
and it really was an injustice. I'll never forget. I don't know if you ever saw this movie. It came out on HBO. It was a movie called "And the Band Played On." Do you remember that? Oh my God, I saw that when I was probably like 9 or 10, Frank, and I had a TV in my room, and I saw it on HBO one night, and I was terrified because even at 10 years old, I thought maybe I'm gay, right? So I was terrified that I was going to get AIDS, I was going to die, and that really stuck with me for a very long time until I sort of deprimed all that, right, in my discovery. But really the impetus of this, and I'm glad you've said all these things, because my hope, when Patrick and his wife Nicolette said, hey, we want to do some really great stuff for Pride, I said, I'm honored, because if anything, if there's some kid out there in Del Rio, Texas, or Bismarck, North Dakota, or Salt Lake City, for example, that's terrified, the answer is it's going to be good. It's going to be better. You're going to find yourself. You're going to be okay. You're going to have a full, and like you said, rich life. But just hang in there, kiddo,
And I know we all sort of intuitively pick out the small towns. I can tell you, I have a colleague whose son is in Memorial High School. And this kid graduated 3 or 4 years ago. He's now out of college and out of business school, so probably 5 years ago. But he said, I stayed in the closet all through high school because I would have been crucified, or at least he felt that way. But then the day he graduated, he was like, I'm gay, tell everybody you want, because I'm telling everybody I want. It's no longer a secret. But I think there are a lot of high schools, no matter how sophisticated the city might be, that kids are kids, and they find their groups, and they can be really, as you say, marginalizing to other people. Now, some of that's brought on ourselves sometimes because we are afraid of who we are, and we automatically think that others are going to be afraid of who we are. But you got to get over part one. Don't be afraid of who you are, and then you'll be someone that everybody wants to be around anyway.
Yeah, that's so true, and that goes not just to being gay or lesbian or anything, but to straight people, right? One of the things that I've known, and you've known me, like I have a lot of straight friends, and they tell me, like after hanging out, maybe going to get bar, they feel so liberated because we sort of get to a point where we're forced to be very truthful and open and free with everything. It's almost inspiring to them, because they're like, oh my God, you guys can talk about whatever at the dinner table or wherever you are. And so I think it kind of lends itself that energy where, you can be, because we're almost forced to be authentic. We have to undo all that damage, right? And they sort of see it because I feel sometimes straight cultures, you live in the burbs and you've got to compete with the Joneses and you've got to go to church on Sundays. And sometimes it's like, you know what, that's not what I want to do. I want to be this kind of person. This is who I am. So I found in my experience, I don't know if it's the same for you, but they think, wow, this is really cool that you guys can sort of say and do whatever's on your mind. We don't get to do that.
Well, the truth shall set you free, which is what we learn in church.
Is it? Yeah, right. Yeah, I already know.
Yeah, I think that that sort of, and it's particularly where I grew up, that unspoken, as we used to say, in the South, if you don't think there's an alcoholic in your family, then you're it. You know,
Uh,
it's
right.
kind of it's that kind of unspoken, you know, well, you know, granddaddy just has he needs new glasses. That's why he's always falling down the stairs, not because he's in the sherry every night.
Right.
And so we're almost taught not to talk about certain things. And certainly, you know, one's more intimate life is probably right on the table of don't talk about that. But, you know, you get to a point where you just build up almost like a wind up Jack in the Box, and you're like, okay, I've just got to tell people this is who I am and this is what I'm about. And hopefully they'll like it. And if they don't, then either we'll find a compromise or we'll find other friends, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Frank, over the course of time, you've seen conservatism, freedom, fear over being a gay man. With respect to what I would perceive to be probably the peak of its acceptance, and I may be wrong on that, and I don't pretend to even understand or know, what do you perceive was the biggest impediment over the course of time to greater acceptance, and what do you think is necessary to propel acceptance to the next level, where everybody accepts it, and the young man that's in high school or the young woman in high school is able to come out and not be fearful of it? And I understand that's kind of a broad question, but what have you seen and what do you think needs to occur?
Well, I have seen remarkably, you know, gay student clubs, and that's fairly prevalent. Now, it takes a person to join that club, but at least there's an automatic support system, and
Right.
that's true of almost all colleges. I think have, not all of them, but a lot of colleges have, you know, gay student unions, which they had them, believe it or not, back in the 70s. They become very popular, you know, there were even dances back in the late 70s and the 80s. But those kind of social groups, I think, help first, because when you feel part of a group, part of, you know, something, and have that sort of really similar interest. I mean, we're not talking about just canoeing, but when you have that really similar interest with other people, that support system helps a lot. And then, of course, there's this blending of, and I don't know, maybe gay student groups and clubs, and just sort of ambassador student groups and clubs, just that all people are welcome. Because what I've seen with young people, they blend together beautifully, gay and straight. They don't, you know, they don't really say, oh, we're going to the gay bar. They just say, oh, we're going to that club, and it might be, you know, predominantly gay, but there's going to be plenty of people there that are not. I think that's one of the key things as a young person, is to find some kind of social acceptance. Now, I can't get kids off their, you know, all their devices to go out. I mean, we kind of had to go out to a bar to make friends, right? I mean, there wasn't any other, you had to join a club to make friends in high school. There wasn't any other way. So I don't know if there are apps that address this, but I think that's key. Wherever you can find the group of people that support you, and not only share your ideas, but support your ideas. If we get more of that, and I think that the internet's probably done a world of wonders in that regard. And then, like, for all people that feel different, I think communication and education is key. I'm not the master of that, but the more people that you have to communicate about whatever, like what we're doing today, and educate, then the broader sense of that we're all in this together and I'm not alone is what will come from that. And that's what I want, you know, that's what I would want people to know, is that you're not isolated. Even if you're in a big city like Houston or New York, or a little city, you're not alone. There are people out there that are just like you, and you just got to find them. But they're a lot easier to find now than they were in 1980, weren't they? Yeah. You were born in 1980.
No,
there were groups, but it was tough.
One of the reasons I was asking is I went to Ole Miss. I noticed you went to Mississippi State, deep South. Mississippi's, what I would dare say, is ultra conservative.
Right.
How was that? I mean, that had to have been a test in and of itself.
Well, that's not really fair. It's not really fair, only because I was an off-campus student,
Okay.
so I wasn't in the culture there. But I grew up in a conservative Alabama town, and all my relatives are from Mississippi and Arkansas, and so it was almost just better to to keep to yourself. And then when I finally, like I said, when I was 19, I finally started to go out. Then of course somebody saw me and told everybody, and my friends were I guess kind enough to not say that they knew, but later in life they told me they knew, and they were waiting to see if I was any different. And they were like, well, okay, we heard that he's gay, but he's not any different. He's the same guy we've always known. So, we'll just go about our world. I guess I knew not to push it on them, and they knew not to drag it out of me. And so we found an even playing field on that with my friends that I grew up with. But certainly when I got to college, and I was at a conservative college, there were kids, like I said, I went to college in 1978. I came out in 79, but I was there in 78. And there were already freshman guys that were kind of coming out, and they really caught they caught enough of an issue with that. I was like, I better stay quiet about this. Yeah. And I think I generally did. By the time I was a senior, not so much, but sophomore and junior years, I was pretty quiet about things, that's for sure. And it was because I saw other people not being accepted. And I was like, well, I don't need to bring that into my life, so I'm not going to. Even though there was always that going with friends I did find off to dances or whatever was going on. Mm-hmm. So it was a very mixed bag, and it was a subculture back then that started late at night because decent people would go to bed before 11, and so the people that weren't decent, that's when they came out.
I'll go out with you after 5 minutes break.
That changed, man. I mean, if it's 11 o'clock, I'm asleep. It wasn't. I don't want to say that the world vilified everyone in those days, but even as we see today, there are always groups that are gonna not like other people for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And I was in that group at one time, and I guess to some degree I still am. I just try to, make sure that I don't let that get to me, and try to. There's still gay people that are beaten up around the country, and you hear about these guys that are beaten. I was at a convention in Miami in 2010. What's that? 10 years ago, and a few of us went out to a club in Miami, and Kevin and I left about 10:30 or 11. And one of the guys stayed late, and he got beaten up right outside that same club 2 hours later. And within an inch of his life. Mm-hmm. And that was to me, I was like shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, we're in Miami, and it's a very welcoming place. Fort Lauderdale, my gosh, everybody I know is retiring to Fort Lauderdale, and the whole Wilton Manors, this whole gay community. And I was really shocked that something like that would happen. But it did, and it still does. So you can't be too careful, but you still have to live your life.
Sure. Frank, in the legal world, we've got one end, which is us plaintiffs lawyers that are very liberal, and then I feel there's sort of the other end of the spectrum, which you've got some of these big defense firms and they're very conservative, and you don't want to ever upset a client. Who knows? Maybe your client's Chick-fil-A, right? What's it like in your industry, in the media? Is it pretty accepting all the way around, or have you ever faced any adversity from your industry based upon the fact that you're gay?
Again, if it happens, I don't know about it. Have I been turned down for jobs because somebody said, well, it may not be a right fit.
Yeah, sure.
And they just kind of say, I don't know. I remember when Kevin and I got married that, we announced it on TV that night. Mm-hmm. And that was 2012. And I think some people spilled their wine when they heard it, But I remember I had the maximum 5,000 Facebook friends, and I lost 500 of them right away.
Really?
But I had another 1,000 wanting to be friends.
Yeah. F off. Yeah.
But from a professional standpoint, I don't, I'm not a hiring manager, but I like to think that, I mean, I know managers that are gay, and there's gays in every part of television that I know of. And so I just don't think that it's more about what you bring to the table and your professionalism and at this size market, your history. Have you been successful in other markets, and do you have a history of success in college and after college and jobs and other jobs, and what does your resume tape look like, or what does your resume look like? And so we like to hire the best people that we can based on that, certainly not on whether they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So,
Frank, we're at the question and answer section. So do you mind, would you take a few questions?
Sure.
Okay.
So the first question is,
Speak up.
Okay.
Yeah, you might have to repeat it. I'm 60 years old, okay?
do you see a pendulum swinging in gay acceptance? For instance, 1 minute people love Ellen, then they are talking about her critically. How do you manage that kind of pendulum for yourself in a city in Texas?
Okay, say that question more. The pendulum swinging and...
Yeah, so do you see a pendulum swinging in gay acceptance? For instance, 1 minute people love Ellen, then they're talking about her critically. How do you manage that kind of pendulum for yourself in a city in Texas?
Well, I think you have to know what your path is and who you are. And then obviously politics is going to change. I mean, there's no question that it was a little different when Vice President Biden and President Obama came out in support of gay marriage. I mean, that made a big difference to everybody. When your leaders support that, then that's going to make it easier. It's just going to trickle down and make it, I think, easier. I think that's what you mean by the pendulum swings, and it does politically sometimes. And the people that think they have more power and can put their will on others are probably the ones that sort of set the agenda. But you have to set your own agenda and say, this is who I am, this is how I'm going to live, and this is my value system, because you have to be happy. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about whether you're leading the kind of life that you want to lead and it's going to make you happy. And I don't think you can do that based on what other people or other politicians or other laws that are passed. Those just happen. They're going to continue to happen. They're going to go up and they're going to go down. And I think if you have your own path, then it won't affect you as much. You can't be fearful every time there's some kind of a new election. You just can't.
Yeah.
It'll drive you crazy.
Very true.
Amanda Stevens asked, what made you go into meteorology?
A job. I needed a job.
Money, yeah.
I was going to be, it's a funny story. I was going to be a reporter, and I graduated in 1982, and I interned at a television station for 6 weeks. And at the end of that 6 weeks, they said, well, we don't have any jobs. But after 3 months, they called me and said, want to be a weatherman? Well, what had happened, and I said, I don't even know all 50 states. I mean, I knew we had 50. I just didn't know where they all were, right? And Michigan has 2 parts.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we think you can learn the states. And that's why I went to Mississippi State, as you mentioned earlier, Robert, because to get that broadcast meteorology. So the Weather Channel started in May of 1981, and they had started taking all of the weather people that they could get to Atlanta to be on the Weather Channel. So there were a lot of openings in these medium markets. And it wouldn't happen today, but there was then, I think, any Frank in a storm, right? And they were kind of desperate. You hear my dog barking?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry. And so I think they were like, well, you know what? We can teach you the states. You have a personality for it. Give it a try. And so I thought, I'll give it 2 years. And if it doesn't work out, I can always go to law school, right? I mean, everybody can be a lawyer.
Anybody can do that. Right.
So that's really how I got into it. And I enjoyed it. I liked learning about it. And the science of it was interesting. And I thought, gosh, this might really be a more than a job. This might be a career. And so I started studying every bit of meteorology I could. There were all kinds of in the 80s, all kinds of correspondence courses that you could take from all different kinds of schools. And so I took it from the United States Department of Agriculture has a whole meteorology program. The Penn State had programs then, Ball State, University of Portland, there's Portland State University. And then finally, Mississippi State University came out with a program. And it was a 2-year program. It's now 3. And it gave you the equivalency of a graduate degree in meteorology. And so I took that and got my seals of approval in 1989. And that's when I went from Virginia to Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi, to Houston in 1989. So it's worked out. We're almost at 40 years. So it's a good thing or a bad thing.
That's so great. So great.
Everybody's got to do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tide Vicious asked, what is the most memorable weather event that you've covered?
Well, lately, of course, there's been Harvey and even Imelda last year. But in terms of shock and awe, it was absolutely Tropical Storm Allison, because that storm, I watched in the weather office, I watched 3 inches of rain per hour fall for 12 hours straight. I mean, 36 hours, and we had not seen anything like that. I mean, since we've seen Allison, Harvey was shocking, but not surprising. Allison was off the chart shocking because we'd never seen that kind of rainfall in 20 years. And if you go back to 1979, there was Tropical Storm Claudette, and that dropped 44 inches of rain in 24 hours in Dickinson, right up Dickinson Bayou. And so it had happened before, but I'd never seen it. And so when we got to 2001, and I'm watching Tropical Storm Allison come in, and it had dropped 10 inches of rain in Pearland, and that was on Tuesday. And then it came back and dropped about 9 or 10 inches on Sugar Land on Wednesday. And then Thursday we got a break, but we knew we weren't done with it yet. And then that Friday night, it started raining on the afternoon. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to stop. And it rained and it rained and it rained and it rained. And it was, I think it was a pretty big shock to the whole city. And you may remember the tunnel system, which is 12 miles of tunnels, and that was full of water downtown. Medical center, the basements, which had decades of research lost because of all the water there. There were 22 lives lost. And it was, it was the only tropical storm name ever to be retired. Usually it's a hurricane name. With $5 billion and 22 lives lost, Tropical Storm Allison ranked right up there with any kind of hurricane you could ever have. So that was, to me at the time, that was the most shocking, and today is the most memorable.
Frank, I have a question that I think a lot of viewers would be interested in, I hope. How do you think the weather will affect the COVID-19 pandemic, good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent? Do you think the weather will and can have an influence on either its spread or how it's affected moving forward?
It's such a double-edged sword. I mean, on the one hand, it's warm weather, and so we're staying away from each other as opposed to being indoors like in cold weather. So just like your cold and flu is more of a winter passage to each other, you would think that summer would be less so. So, but because the weather's warm and nice, everybody's out, wanting to be outside. So I think if people try to really make an effort to do both, to stay distant in appropriate times, wear masks, and yet enjoy the outdoors, hopefully that will make it better. But I've read some good articles that say, look, this is a lipid fat covered virus molecule, and with heat and humidity, it will be less so. It will kill it. And we've heard some of the doctors, I think Burke came out and said that heat does seem to kill the virus. Let's hope. I think it's too early. I mean, it's going to be hot this week. So it'll be interesting to see with Memorial Day crowds and then the protest crowds, but yet in the hot weather, what are we going to see? And I think we're just going to have to wait for that answer. But I don't, I think one of the real concerns with weather in COVID-19 is like what we had just this weekend with a tropical storm or a hurricane. Where do you evacuate people that have to be evacuated? How do you put them on buses? We're used to filling up a bus to evacuate people. Are you going to give everybody a mask and and tell them to face the window. And I mean, you know, are you going to fill half the bus? There's a bus issue with getting people evacuated. And then where do you evacuate them to where they're safe? And if there's a flood like a Harvey, and suddenly people have to be evacuated just to wherever you can find, you know, like a dry land, wherever, a school, a church, a convention hall that you're not really prepared for, but you have to do that. What's the answer? So I think emergency management, and they do a wonderful job here in Houston. I think that's probably one of the big questions that they're faced with right now, and probably have a plan. I mean, they faced other H1N1 and Ebola. It's not the first time that they've had to deal with at least epidemics in the face of a tropical storm season. And hopefully we'll have those answers so that when it happens, and if it happens, we get taken care of.
Yeah. That's a great point. The emergency management component is something I don't think a lot of people have considered as we enter hurricane season. It's frightening.
Well, is there any money left? You know, you got to have money for emergency management. Money's tight right now, as everyone knows.
Right.
Do we have more time?
So I have one more question. It's from Genesis Perez, and she asks, what kind of things might a person go through when coming out, and how can someone help them through it?
I think a family psychologist is really good at this sort of thing. And then if you have, you know, an older person that you've watched go through it, and sometimes that's a family member. I mean, it seems like everybody has a gay uncle, doesn't it? So there's sometimes that person. It's true.
It's true.
And then there are, and if you don't feel comfortable joining a gay student union or a gay club, there's usually at least a teacher that is in charge of that club, and you could go to them privately and say, you know, I don't feel comfortable coming out and joining the club, but I just want to talk to you about what I'm going through. Because I get, you know, going to a family psychologist if you're 16, well, how are you going to do that? You don't have the money. Sure. It's $150 an hour at least. You don't want to go to your parents. You know, I mean, it's tough. Sure. If you have a church organization, oftentimes you can reach out to those people, but that's individual. You know, there are some people. I mean, one of my best friends is a lesbian who's an Episcopal priest and has a wonderful parish in Wilmington, North Carolina. So there are gay priests in the Episcopal Church, and certainly there are gay clergy in other religions, if that's an option. Or if nothing else, you can usually talk to your pediatrician and just say, you know, Mom, Dad, I need to go to the doctor, you know, for whatever reason. And once you're in there privately, you might ask them for some advice, then they might know of some resources. But there are resources out there. And if nothing else, PFLAG, and I'm going to be speaking for Father's Day. Kevin and I and our son Morgan are going to be doing a Zoom conference with the Houston PFLAG group this Sunday at, I think, 2:30, because it's Father's Day. And PFLAG's I think, a really useful organization. And I remember back in Biloxi when I was there, and I had just come out to my parents, and I was 27. And so I was more concerned about their mental health than mine. Yeah. So I'd come to terms with everything, and not so much them at the time. And I reached out to PFLAG. I called PFLAG, and I said, you know, it's parents and friends of lesbians and gays, and what can I do to help my parents? And they recommended the book Now That You Know, which is still a very good book. Yeah. So that, I think that helped. But they're really good resources like that. If you just want to call someone anonymously and just talk and get some ideas about what you can do, I would try PFLAG.
Frank, I think all of the ideas are great. We've got some stuff, some really great stuff. The firm went all out, and look at, we've got these rainbow sweatbands and t-shirts and tank tops, and it's fantastic. It has our logos and stuff. So we're going to send you a packet of some really cool goodies you and Kevin are going to love. And then for our viewers, we also have, I think we're going to have 5 boxes for listeners that are tagging Patrick Daniel Law. What are they tagging him to, Celia?
Our Facebook.
No, to our Facebook. We've got some amazing, everybody that comes in the office, Frank, has to wear a pin that's rainbow, that has our logo. I mean, they went all out. It's fantastic. It's just great.
Nice.
You're going to get a bunch of great goodies, but Frank, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. for
Your
this.
advice
We
was
appreciate it.
invaluable.
Yeah,
I mean, it
yeah.
was really insightful. Your experience and your journey, I think it's going to educate and assist a lot of people. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I mean, education is the key to, I think, everything. When I've been in a lot of meetings where I always thank the teachers because none of us get to where we are without a teacher. Absolutely. I think parents have discovered that now that they've had to educate their kids at home.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
so education is key to it all, whether it's in school or like what we're doing today. So happy Pride, guys.
Thanks so much, Frank. And we'll see you tonight on TV.
I'll be there. Hot. 98 degrees, gonna feel like 110.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir.
That's right. We have to wear suits every day, but we're doing what we got to do.
Thank you, Frank.
Awesome,
We
Frank.
appreciate
Thanks
it.
again. We'll see you
Have a
soon.
great
I'll see you
day.
soon. Tell Kevin I said hello.